Hi, I'm Tony and this is how I developed my coursework final piece on the theme of space. I had experimented with this before by breaking my hand through a photograph of a hand, but I wanted to develop this more complex and more neat because this project was quite untidy. This experiment had been inspired by Stephen Shaw's book The Nature of the Photograph, where he had talked about the physical boundaries and the physical limitations of a photograph, and I wanted to see if we could break this. It felt like my coursework was coming to an end, so I decided to put my heart into a project that was going to be quite complex and big. I wanted to start with something very cliched and simple, like a flower. This is something that's really over-photographed in my opinion, and it was something I feel I could have enough room to develop on.
You wouldn't believe how many photographs of flowers there are. Type it into Google and there's millions of them. It irritates me when I find a photography blog and the owner just fills it with close-ups of flowers. Flowers are one of those things, like sunsets or cats, that are far too over-photographed. By choosing such a cliched subject to start my project with, I knew I was being risky, but at the same time I knew that if I were to develop on it enough, I could come up with a final piece that was complex and interesting. I also felt that by choosing such a simple subject, I had more ways and room to develop and branch out in creative ways.
So I went and bought a plastic flower from Hobbycraft. To then create the photo, I cut the flower head off of the flower and some of the leaf. I then got my arm to hold the stalk and the leaf under a well-lit wall so I could photograph it. After this, I put it up on the computer, edited it so it was life-sized and printed it out. I could then stick the flower head and the leaf on top of the photograph where it was missing and create a 3D photograph.
Here is my first photograph presented on the display board. As you move around the image, from some angles it looks distorted and strange, yet from others it looks perfectly natural. I like this and saw it as a way to engage a viewer looking at my photograph.
Okay, so my first part was done. I had this 3D photograph of a flower. But now I want to develop on top of it, because let's face it, it was quite cliched still. I needed kind of a story behind the way that these levels were going to build up, so I decided to focus on the idea of curiosity and studying something in great depth.
When someone is curious about something, they want to find out more. They will study and explore this particular something. For my next stage, I set up a scene where I had someone holding the flower and painting it. In their left hand they held the first photograph, loosely lined up with the hand, and in their right, painting the petals and the flower and studying its colour and form. I chose the cup of water and the paintbrush to be the 3D objects for this layer, so cut them in half to use when photographing and stuck the other half to the image once I had printed it out life-sized.
So now I was ready for my third and final layer. The second layer had already made it look quite complex, so this third layer was really going to be busy on the eye. My second stage had been someone painting the flower and studying it. For my third layer I wanted them presenting it somewhere where they could see it. I decided to photograph my third layer on a shelf.
This way I could show the painter's finished studies and observations on display as if he or she were proud of them. I chose the shelf and 2 books to be 3D.
As this was the final layer, I decided to display it on a display board in school.
I presented them in order, with the busy, complex image at the bottom, the middle development in between, and the simple starting point at the top. As I move around the image, I can see the 3D objects from different perspectives to the photograph. I find it interesting to try to position myself where I can see the angle where the two match up. The images become quite hard to look at as they go down, due to the increasing complexity and how busy they are. When you first look at them, you can see things repeated, such as the painting or the first image, but it takes a while to look closer and figure the whole thing out visually.
I liked how at the beginning of my project I'd started off with something really simple, and then through the different processes I'd come up with this very complex piece of work.
I am pleased with the outcome, both technically and visually. I had managed to overcome some technical problems and had ended up with what I think is a playful project that can be interesting to look at. The project has taught me that it's okay to take risks and break rules. I've challenged the cliché of the flower and showed how development can completely change an initial idea. This was a fun piece to do, and I hope you, like me, found it spark some curiosity.